Well, hello Internet, and welcome to part 20 of my Learn to Program series. And this part of the tutorial, we're going to use Tkinter to actually make Python interfaces. And this is going to be part 1 of a Tkinter tutorial that is going to go on for a couple different videos. And specifically, we're going to learn how to create graphical user interfaces, or GUIs, with TK. And TK is a cross-platform GUI toolkit that's going to provide things called widgets, which in the actual real world are things like buttons and scroll bars and things like that we're going to use to build our interfaces. And Tkinter in particular is a Python interface that is going to be able to work with TK. And another awesome thing about Tkinter is it's going to be included for all versions of Python 3.1 and above for both Macs and Windows, as well as on Linux. And if you haven't watched previous parts of the tutorial, I provide a link in the description, and I have a lot to do, so let's get into it. Alright, so the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to come in here and actually test that Tkinter is actually working. So to do so, we're going to go import and Tkinter like that, and then go Tkinter _test right like that. That's all you need to do, and run it, and you're going to see this little window pop up here. And if you see that, you know everything's wonderful and everything's working and so forth and so on. So you can close that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to import some modules we have here. And so I'm going to go Tkinter, and I'm just going to import everything just to keep everything nice and simple. And then I'm going to go from Tkinter import TTK. Alright, so we have the modules that we're going to need, and why don't I just go and do a simple hello world thing. So the very first thing we're going to do is we are going to create a TK object, and root is going to be the main window that's going to surround our interface. It's the window itself that pops up on the screen. And to do so, you just go root is equal to TK. It doesn't have to be called root, but it's very common that everybody calls it root. And let's say that we want to come in here and give our window a title. We can just go something like first GUI like that. And let's say we want to put a window in, or a button inside of our window. We can do that as well. We can just go TTK and button like this, and root. And there's a whole bunch of different ways to add components, change components, do all kinds of things with components. So as we go through, I'm going to show you a whole bunch of them. So we can say something like hello Tkinter, and that'll be the text on our little button. And then we'll just use grid here, which is a simple layout manager. We'll get into the details here later on, but it's just a way of structuring where the different components or widgets are going to be placed inside of our window. And then finally, we're going to come in here and call main loop, and this is just going to keep our root window visible and our program running until they decide to close it. And if we run that, you're going to see right here that our little window pops up. You can see there, first GUI, there's where we set the title, and here is where we threw our button inside of there. Okay, so that is our first entry into the world of Tkinter. And if you're wondering about all the different components that are available, you're going to see here are a whole bunch of different components. We have buttons and labels and canvases and menus and menu buttons and radio buttons and a whole bunch of other different things, which I'm going to show you some of them in this part of the tutorial and the rest of them as the tutorial continues. So let's do something a little bit more complicated. Again, we're going to need this so that we have our TK object that we'll be using to add everything and work with all our little tools. And also what you want to use here now is a frame, and a frame is just a widget that's going to surround other widgets. So we'll go frame, and we'll pass in root inside of there. And then also what I'm going to use here is what's called a Tkinter variable, and I'm going to use it to change the text for one of our label components. So I'm going to come in and go label text is equal to string variable. And then let's go and create a label as well as a button and maybe set some attributes. So I'm going to go label. This doesn't have to be called label. It's just what I called it here. You can call it whatever you'd like. And we'll go label. And then you're going to add in the frame that you want to put this label inside of. It's just boxes inside of boxes. Real simple stuff. And here what I'm going to do is I'm going to go text variable is going to be equal to, and I'm going to make it equal to label text, this guy up here, and then I'm going to change it afterwards. Also, let's say we want to throw a button inside of here. We can just go button. Once again, the frame that you want your button to be pushed inside of. And you can also set the text for your button or any of your components just by referencing text and say something like click me. And then what we'll do down here is just reference this guy up here and change the text inside of it, and that's going to automatically change the text inside of our label component. And how do you do that is you call set, and I'll say something like I am a label, just to keep it simple. Then what you need to do is, instead of grid, we're going to use another geometry manager here that's called pack. And pack is just going to position the widgets inside of our window for us. So we'll just go label and pack. And then let's do the same thing with our button and call pack on that as well as our frame and call pack on that. And if we do all that and run it, whoops, got a little bit of a bug. What happened here? Whoops. My little thing where I always do uppercase camel case lettering is sort of ingrained in my brain, so make that a lowercase v and run it again. And if you do, you're going to see a little window pops up here right here, and it says I am a label, and click me. And if you click on it, it doesn't do anything. In a moment here, I'll get into event handling. But you can see right there an example of how we can change the text that is inside of our label as well as in some of our other components. So now what I want to do is jump in and talk more precisely about how the pack geometry manager is going to work for us. Now, pack is a very simplistic geometry manager, and all that means is it defines how all of your components are going to be laid out inside of the window you create. So geometry manager sounds complicated, but that's what it does. And pack specifically is going to position widgets by allowing them to define their position. So things like top and right and bottom and left inside of the window, also in comparison to other components that are inside of there. And it's also going to allow them to define their fill direction, which means how they will be stretched into the window. So that's going to be in the X or the Y direction. You can also have both be an option as well as none. And now I'm going to show you a couple examples of how we can do this. So once again, we're going to use root here. And once again, I'm also going to create frame, which is going to surround all of these guys, and we pass root to it. And then let's come in here and just create a label and a whole bunch of buttons and show how by changing the different attributes we can have these guys work together. So I don't need to have a reference to the names for these components, so I'm not going to actually store them in a variable. I'm just going to create them, throw them on the screen, and let them do their thing. So I'm going to go text, and here we could say something like a bunch of buttons, just to throw something inside of there, and I'm going to call pack on that, and you're going to see the pack basically is just going to throw that on the screen and not do anything positioning wise. Now I'm also going to create some buttons here, and I am going to have them be positioned, and I'll keep the text really simple here. So for the text, I'm just going to have this be button 1, and then specifically with pack, I'm going to say that I want this to be put on the leftmost side of the screen, and make sure this is an uppercase left. And I'm going to say that I want this to fill in the Y direction, and let's also have that be uppercase. Going to go and create 4 buttons here just so we can see a whole bunch of different examples and how they work together. Let's change this to button 2 and 3 and 4. I'm going to have this button right here actually line up on the top, and I'm going to have the fill direction in this guy be in the X position, and this one I'm going to have it be on the right, and the fill direction on this is also going to be in the X direction. And then let's also come in and change this to left and the fill direction be X, and then we can come in and just go frame and pack like that and run it. And you can see exactly how all these different guys are being positioned inside of here. So let's zoom in a little bit so we can see it a little bit better. So B1, this guy, we're saying we want that to be in the leftmost position and to take up everything in the Y direction, so there's no components above or underneath of it. B2 is going to be in the top, and it's going to completely fill everything in the X direction that it can possibly fill. Then B3, we're going to have that be on the right, so that's why it is on the right, and B4 is on the left, as they are both defined there, and they're going to take up as much in the X direction as they possibly can. Okay, so there is a simple look at the Pack Geometry Manager, and it's not used that much unless you're using an extremely simple interface. What, however, is used a lot is the Grid Geometry Manager, and we're going to look at that next. Now, the Grid Manager is the most useful of all the different geometry managers that we have here. And basically what it does is it lines up widgets on your screen in using rows and columns like a table or a matrix. And I'm actually going to create 2 of these guys. So basically what's going to happen is each cell is going to be able to hold 1 widget, but it will be possible for a widget to cover multiple different cells. So just think of a table, and it rows and columns, and there's little boxes inside of boxes and things like that. And what we're doing is basically defining where those little boxes go. So we're going to come in here and we are going to create a label. I have no reason to actually have to have a reference to this widget, so I'm just going to go label and root. And then I'm going to define the text that I want this label to have. So let's say I want to have something like first name, and then this gets to the grid part of the geometry manager. So if we're using the grid geometry manager, you're going to see grid there, and then I need to define some things. So I want it to be in the top row, and the rows start with the 0 index, so I'm just going to go row and 0. I'm then going to define sticky and have that be west, and sticky is going to define how the widget's going to expand. So the widget's going to expand either in the north, northeast, east, southeast, south, southwest, west, or northwest directions. And you're going to use these abbreviations, so north, northeast, northwest, west, east. You get it. So those are the different ways that we're going to be able to expand these different components or widgets. And then you could also come in and put padding. There's a whole bunch of different attributes that are available. I'm just going to keep it a little bit simple here though. So I'm going to say the padding around this component or widget is going to be 4 pixels. And then let's come in and let's say if we want the user to be able to enter information, we're going to use the entry widget for that. And we can say grid, and this is going to be on the same row as we did with our label. We are, however, going to put it in the second column, which is going to be the number 1 column. This guy, we're going to have it be sticky to the east, and we'll go and throw padding as well with this in the Y direction equal to 4. So this is going to be padding on the left and right. This guy's going to be padding on the top and the bottom. And let's go and do 2 more of these guys just to do something here. So let's go and grab that. Throw that inside of there. This guy's going to be changed to a last name. We want this on the second row, so we're going to change that to 1. Everything else here is perfectly fine. We're going to change this to 1 as well. This is going to be the second column, so we'll leave it exactly like that. And then let's say after that we decide we want to throw a button on the screen. We can say button. Root is what's going to contain it, and let's say we want the text on this button that's going to show up to be submit, and then we'll come in here and do grid again, and we'll say that this is going to be on the 3rd row. And we can do all that different stuff and run it, and you're going to see it shows up much like you would think. There's first name, there's the entry where you can enter information, and then you have the submit where we're going to be able to click on that and submit that information somewhere. So pretty cool stuff. Now what I want to do is to create a little bit more complicated type of design. And this layout is going to have a label and then an entry on the right side of it that's going to be 50 pixels in width. You can also define the pixels for all of your widgets. It's then going to have a button on the right side, and then underneath of that what we're going to do is have a label followed by a bunch of radio buttons, and then on the right side of that label with the radio buttons we're also going to have a label that is going to have some check buttons underneath of it. So let's go in here and create it. So we'll say that we want a label. This is going to go in the root window. We're going to go and put something like description, and that's going to be something that they're going to be able to fill in. We're going to say that we want a grid, and it's going to be on the first row. And so to do that, we'll say row is equal to 0. We want this to be in the very first column, so we'll also have that be 0. And then we want this to be on the west side of the screen, so we'll say sticky and west. And then we decided that we wanted to have an entry box that they could enter information in, so we'll go root We said we wanted it to be 50 pixels in width, so we'll set that to 50. Go into grid and define how that's going to be positioned. So it's going to be once again on the same row as our label, so we'll have that be 0. And then to accommodate the width that we want to work here, let's just go in and we'll do something like column is equal to 8. And you'll play around with things like this until they are positioned properly. And then we'll come in and we will do button and root, and our button's going to have submit inside of it. And then we'll define our grid here again. And with this guy, once again, it's going to be on the same row as all the other different guys. And here I'm going to, well, actually, let's change this to 1. Sorry about that. And let's change this column right here to be 8. And we'll run that and see what's going on. Got a little bit of a bug, name error, name W. Remember, these are always supposed to be uppercase letters. I should remember that, but I don't sometimes. And when I run it, you can see right there, description, and then there's the entry box and the submit button. And whenever I'm designing interfaces, well, first off, I draw them with paper and pencil and then go and create them from there. But we also would benefit greatly by just going and creating each row of the interface one by one. Don't try to do it all at once, otherwise it might get confusing. All right, so now what do we want to do? Well, we want to have a label, and then we want to have a bunch of radio buttons underneath it. So we're going to create our label, and we're going to have something like our quality. We're going to define where exactly we want to place this using grid once again. We want this on the second row, so make row equal to 1. We want this to be directly underneath of our label here, so we're going to have that be in the same column as the other label that we have on our screen. And we want it to line up also, so we're going to make sure that we have sticky and west on there. If we want to make some radio buttons, we can just go radio button, and once again it's going to go inside of the root window. And then we could do something like new, good, poor, and damage to describe the quality of our product. So we'll do something like new, and then we can assign, whoops, let's make this new like that. And then we're going to, let's say we wanted to give it a value so that we know which radio button was clicked on. We could say value 1, and then define our grid. We want this underneath of the label, so we're going to define our row is going to be equal to 2. And we want this in the same column as our label, so we'll have that also be 0. And so that everything lines up, sticky is going to be equal to west. And let's come in here and let's copy this so we can have a whole bunch of different radio buttons. So 1, 2, 3, 4, there we are. Have the next one inside of here be something like good, and then we could say poor. On the last one we could say that the item is damaged. And really simple stuff. Everything else is going to be exactly the same. All we need to do here is just change the rows that we're going to be working with. So let's just come in here and change that to 3 and change that to 4 and then change this to 5. And let's run it and see if we got everything right. And you can see that it's pretty much exactly what I wanted it to be. So we're going to be able to come in here and change all of these different values, except they are all selected here. And how we can fix that is by coming in here and changing the values that are assigned. So this is going to be 2 and 3 and 4. And let's run it again. And now we can see we're getting what we want. So now we're going to be able to check one of the radio button items, but all the other ones are not going to be selected. So there's only going to be one option for that. Now what I want to do, and if you don't see your little thing pop up, you might be down here, so click on that. Or it might be hidden behind a window or something like that. Now what I want to do is come in here and have another label that's going to have some check boxes or check buttons underneath of it, and that's going to go right in here. Once again, all I need to do is reference the columns and rows, and everything will go exactly where we want it to. So we're going to come in and do another label, and this is going to go root, and the text is going to be benefits, and that's enough information. And then we will go grid, and now I want it to be right next to the other guy. So guess what? We're just going to use all of this. So that's going to put it right next to it. The only difference is I want it to be in a different column. So I want it to be to the right, so I'm going to increase the column by 1. And there that is. Now if I want to use check buttons or check boxes, we just go check button. Once again, root is going to define where it goes, text, and we're going to say free shipping is maybe an option for our item that we're trying to sell here. And then we'll do grid. We're going to change our row to the row underneath of it. So let's just change row to 2. And then column is going to be equal to 1. And then sticky is going to be equal to west. And let's go and just copy this and throw another check button underneath of it. And let's say another option that we have here is bonus gift. I'm just coming up with stuff out of my head here if you haven't caught on with that. And I want this to be in the next row, so change that to 3. The column's going to stay the same, everything else is going to stay the same, and we run it. And there you can see. So there's a little bit more complicated type of GUI interface that we were able to create there, and it's just a matter of figuring out what rows and boxes everything needs to go into. Now, as the last part of the tutorial, I'm going to show you how events work with Tkinter. So I am going to create, outside of this little box area, a function that's going to be called whenever a button is going to be clicked on. And it's going to be called getSum, and some event information is going to be clicked or passed into this function anytime an item is clicked on. And let's see what we're going to do with that. Well, let's come down here and create the interface first, and then jump up here and worry about the function after that. So once again, we're going to use root and create the TK object. And then what we're going to do is we are going to create some entries. So I'm going to call this num1 entry is equal to, and if I want to be able to get access to the information that is stored inside of these entries, I cannot put grid at the end. I have to add the positioning elements afterwards, as I'm going to show you here in a second. So I can say something like entry and root like that, and then if I do that, I'll be able to reference this and grab information out of the widget later on. So then I'm going to go num1 entry, and I'm just going to use pack here just to keep it nice and simple. So I'll say that I want this to be on the left side. And let's go and do a couple more. And all this is going to do is take 2 values entered in the entries and sum them and then update the interface. I'm also going to put a label inside of here. In this situation, I have no reason to change the text inside of the label, so I'm just going to leave it the way that it is, and it's going to have like a plus sign inside of there. And then I can call pack on this, and once again have it be positioned on the left. Now we'll add our second entry inside of here, so let's just change that to 2 and that to 2, and we'll leave everything else here exactly the same. And then we're going to have a button that's going to be the equals button. It's going to add up all this stuff, so I'll just call this equal button like that, and create our button. And here, and just go text is equal to, and I'll put an equal sign inside of there. And then I want to bind an event handler to our button. And now what I want to do is bind the left mouse button whenever it's clicked, that it is going to actually call this function and execute it up here. And how you do that is you just go equal button, and then we go bind, and then we'll define what event I'm specifically looking for. And the event I'm looking for is the button one press, which is going to be the leftmost mouse button. And then I'm going to define the function that's going to be executed every time that button is clicked on. Then of course I have to come in here and pack my item or my widget on the screen. And once again, I'll just go left just to keep that simple. I then want to create another entry so that I will be able to update the sum information on the screen. And I'm just going to call this sum entry and sum entry right there. And now we'll go up into our function and actually define what exactly is going to be changing whenever the button is clicked on. If I want to get the value that was input by the user in the entry, I can just go num1, and it's going to be a string, so I'm going to convert it into an integer, and I can go num1 entry like this, and then get like that. And let's do exactly the same thing for num2. Throw that inside of there, and we'll change this to num2 and num2 entry like that. We can then sum these two values together, so we'll go num1 plus num2, whoops, num2. And then if I want to actually insert the sum of those two values in our sum entry, I can just go sum entry, and call insert, throw 0 inside of there, and sum, which is the value that I want put in the entry. And if I run it, you're going to see this little guy pops up inside of here, and we'll be able to come in and do something like 3 and 4 and equals. However, if I do something like 5 like that, you're going to get a surprise. Oh, look at that. It went and added them up, but it put that inside the text box. So let's go and correct that. How we can delete the value inside of there is just go sum entry once again, and we go delete and pass 0 inside of there, and then end and run it again. And here we are, and now we can use it the way we think we should use it, which is 5 and 6 is equal to, and then change that to 8 and equal to, and now we get the right answer. Okay, so there is a whole bunch of things about Tkinter, and like I said, there's going to be a whole bunch of other videos after this one explaining pretty much everything you'd want to know about Tkinter. And like always, please leave your questions and comments below. Otherwise, till next time.